Hey guys, tonight we step back nearly 1,000 years, into a place that will test every modern comfort you've ever known. Welcome to a small medieval village, tucked between damp fields and dark forests where survival is as uncertain as the sunrise. You probably won't last a day here, but let's see how far you make it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, as always, comment where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is cold and thick as you stand before a low wooden gate. A crooked sign marks the entrance, though you can't read the Latin letters carved into it. The smell hits you first: smoke, manure, and something sour and wet. Behind the fence, the village stirs like a living thing. You hear the distant thud of an axe, a dog barking, the muffled cries of a baby, and the chatter of women bent over buckets. You take a hesitant step forward, your boots sinking into mud so deep it tries to claim you. The mud here is more than just dirt. It's the pulse of the place, fed by rain, waste, and years of trampled lives. Chickens scatter around your legs, and a boy no older than 12 pauses in his chore to stare at your strange clothes. His eyes are curious but not welcoming. The village feels smaller than you imagined. Just a handful of huts with sagging thatched roofs, all leaning slightly as if exhausted by time. Smoke seeps from gaps between the straw, and somewhere nearby, a pig squeals, sharp and final. It's not a tourist village or a romantic storybook. It's alive, raw, and indifferent to your presence. A woman passes by with a basket balanced on her hip. Her face is lined, though she can't be older than 30. She gives you a glance, a mix of suspicion and fatigue. Everyone here knows everyone else, and you are not one of them. In this world, being a stranger is almost the same as being dangerous. A man with a leather jerkin and a patchy beard approaches. His gait is slow but deliberate. "You're not from the manor, are you?" he asks in an accent thick with the rolling sounds of Old English. You shake your head, unsure what to say. He studies you a moment longer, then shrugs. "Then you'll work for your stay," he mutters. And just like that, your introduction to the medieval world is complete. No warm welcomes, no orientation packet. You've arrived at the bottom of the feudal ladder, where existence itself is the only job description. The man leads you past a row of huts. He points out the communal oven, just a mound of clay with smoke bleeding from a hole in the top. Next, the well, where women gossip while hauling water heavier than their children. A few scrawny dogs linger near the edges, waiting for scraps. The sound of a bell drifts from the small chapel at the far end of the road. Its tone is cracked but familiar, like the heartbeat of the place. You notice the absence of privacy. Everything is out in the open: arguments, laughter, hunger, even death. The idea of closing a door and being alone is foreign here. It's a shared life, for better or worse. Historians still argue whether these villages were close-knit communities of cooperation or just networks of mutual necessity. But looking around, you sense it's both. People depend on one another because the land demands it. Survival isn't optional, it's communal. A gust of wind carries the scent of the fields, wet hay, dung, and something faintly sweet from wild herbs. It's oddly grounding, reminding you that this is a world that grows its own air, that bleeds its own earth. You catch sight of a tanner's shed at the edge of the village, where hides hang like stretched ghosts. The man inside stirs a vat of something that makes your eyes sting. He nods without looking up. You try to imagine what this place must look like at night. No street lamps, no electricity, just the glow of hearths and the shimmer of fireflies. The darkness must feel heavy, the kind that presses close and swallows sound. A girl chases a goose past you, laughing. For a brief second, there's a flicker of life that feels familiar. Innocence, or maybe just the timeless joy of being young and careless. But as the laughter fades, you notice her bare feet, red from the cold. Comfort here is fleeting. You reach the village green, a patch of uneven ground where the grass has long since given up. A wooden post stands at the center, its surface scarred and darkened. The man notices your gaze. "That's the whipping post," he says casually. keeps folk honest. You realize that in this world, justice and fear share the same space. Nearby, a pair of oxen plod slowly in circles, grinding grain under a heavy stone wheel. The rhythm is hypnotic, the creak of wood and groan of leather almost musical. You can see how easy it would be to drift into the pace of this life, to wake, toil, eat, and sleep without asking questions. And yet, you already feel the weight of it. The cold seeping through your boots, the smell clinging to your clothes, the ache in your back from simply standing. You can't help thinking, how did anyone survive this century, let alone find joy in it? The man stops in front of a hut. "You'll stay here," he says. The doorway is so low you have to crouch to enter. Inside, dim light filters through gaps in the wall. There's straw on the floor, a small hearth, and the faint rustle of something alive under the hay. "Don't worry," he says, "they're only mice." As you step inside, a sense of unreality settles over you. You're not in a museum exhibit, you're in someone's daily struggle. Every smell, every creak of the floor, every shadow cast by the flickering fire tells the same story. Survival isn't glorious, it's just stubborn. Outside, the church bell tolls again, one slow, solemn note that echoes across the valley. You close your eyes for a moment and breathe it in. This is the sound of the past. And for tonight, it's the sound of where you are. Morning arrives before the sun does. You're half awake, half dreaming when a rooster screams from somewhere too close to your ear. For a moment, you have no idea where you are, until the smell of smoke, mud, and straw rushes back. The medieval village hasn't gone anywhere, and neither have you. Your breath clouds in the frigid air as you sit up. The straw under you is damp, and your muscles ache from sleeping on uneven ground. You glance at the hearth, only faint embers remain, glowing weakly under a blanket of ash. You have no matches, no lighter, and the woodpile outside is more frost than fuel. The door creaks open, and a sliver of pale light cuts through the gloom. A woman's voice calls softly, "Up, work's starting." You shuffle out into the morning mist, wrapping your cloak, if you can call it that, tighter around your shoulders. The chill cuts deep, sharp as glass. The world beyond the doorway looks washed out and gray. Smoke drifts low over the rooftops, blending with fog. Every breath tastes of damp earth and wood fire. You can hear movement from every corner of the village. Buckets sloshing, chickens clucking, the rhythmic thud of someone splitting logs. It's a sensory overload, but not the kind you're used to. No hum of traffic, no buzz of screens. Just raw, organic noise, the sound of survival. You pass by a woman scrubbing clothes in a wooden tub. Her hands are red and cracked from cold water. She hums softly to herself, though her song sounds more like a memory than music. Next to her, a toddler plays with a lump of clay, smearing it across his face with glee. The woman doesn't scold him, she just keeps working. Dirt here is constant, and maybe that's why no one fights it. You take your first real breath of the morning and nearly choke. The air is thick with the smoke of peat fires, animal waste, and something metallic from the blacksmith's forge. Historians still argue whether the stench of the Middle Ages is exaggerated, but you'd bet your modern knows it's not. People here have built their lives around the smell of decay and endurance. It's their background music. Down the narrow path, a man with a cart rolls past you. His wheels sink into the mud with every turn, spraying brown water across your legs. He doesn't apologize, no one does. Courtesy here is a luxury, and every villager seems to know there's no time for pleasantries when daylight itself is currency. You make your way toward the fields, following a small stream that glimmers faintly in the dull light. The water looks clean, but you remember what you saw last night, waste dumped carelessly near the banks. Still, the villagers drink it. Boiling water is a privilege reserved for the sick or the noble. A boy around 10 years old walks beside you, balancing a pail on his shoulder. His bare feet sink into the mud, but he moves with ease. "You're soft," he says, glancing at your boots. "Ain't used to muck." You smile weakly, but he's not wrong. You already miss dry socks. Further ahead, you spot the blacksmith's hut, one of the few solid buildings in the village. Sparks burst from its doorway like fireflies, and the rhythmic clang of hammer on iron rings through the air. The sound is oddly comforting, a heartbeat of industry in an otherwise fragile world. You peek inside to see a broad-shouldered man shaping a horseshoe, his face glistening with sweat despite the cold. He nods once before returning to his work, muscles moving like machinery before machinery existed. A stray dog sniffs near your feet. You reach out to pet it, but it growls softly and trots away. Dogs here aren't pets, they're workers, scavengers, survivors. Like everyone else. A flock of crows circles above, their calls harsh and echoing. You wonder what they live on. Then you see it, a dead sheep by the fence, half buried in mud, its wool stiff with frost. The crows land and pick at it methodically. You turn away, but it's too late. The image is etched in your mind. Nature here doesn't waste anything. You pass the edge of the village and step onto a rutted road that leads toward open farmland. From here, you can see the full layout of the settlement. A handful of huts clustered around the church, a few fields stretching toward the horizon, and the forest looming behind it all, dark, silent, and full of secrets. Someone once wrote that medieval villages looked quietly eternal, but standing here, you realize how fragile they were. One bad harvest, one outbreak, one flood, and everything could vanish. A bent old man hobbles past you, muttering something about the weather. His teeth are few, his skin like parchment. He clutches a wooden cross around his neck and spits into the mud before crossing himself. Superstition isn't just belief here, it's insurance. Historians still debate how much of peasant religion was true faith and how much was fear, but for the people who live here, it's all the same thing. As the sun finally breaks through the haze, the village takes on color. The brown mud becomes gold, the smoke turns silver, and the sound of hammers, animals, and voices merges into something almost rhythmic. For a brief moment, it feels peaceful. You take another breath, still smoky, still foul, and realize you're starting to get used to it. Your senses dull just enough to function. Maybe that's the real secret of survival here, adaptation through exhaustion. A woman nearby scatters grain for her chickens, her expression calm but distant. You watch her hands, rough and strong, and wonder how many years of work they've endured. Her ring finger bears no band, just a scar, faint but visible. You don't ask. Somewhere in the distance, the church bell rings again. This time, it sounds softer, almost gentle. Life in the medieval village has begun for another day, and so have you. You look around one last time, the smoke, the mud, the flicker of life in every doorway, and realize something quietly profound. This world may be brutal, but it's deeply human. Imperfect, unwashed, and endlessly alive. You duck your head to step back into the hut, the one the man assigned you the night before. The thatched roof droops like it's tired of keeping out the world, and the doorframe smells faintly of mildew and smoke. Inside, it's dim and claustrophobic, lit only by the flicker of a rekindled fire. The warmth is meager but precious. You take a moment to absorb it all, the uneven earthen floor, the rough timber beams, the lingering scent of old hay and damp wool. This is your home now, or at least your crash course in medieval real estate. A hen clucks softly from a corner, fluttering her wings. You realize she's not wild, she belongs here. Animals share space with people, not out of affection but necessity. The heat from livestock helps keep the hut warm through bitter winters, and in return, they enjoy scraps of food and protection from predators. You look down to see a thin piglet snuffling near the hearth, rooting through straw for crumbs. A woman kneels near the fire, stirring something in a small pot. It's more of a thick brown sludge than a stew, but the smell is earthy and almost comforting. She glances at you without surprise. She's used to strangers, or maybe just too tired to care. If you're staying, you'll earn your keep, she says flatly. You nod, though you have no idea how. She points toward the roof where sunlight filters through 1,000 pinholes. That's how we know it's morning, she says with dry humor. You grin despite yourself. Maybe medieval sarcasm isn't that different after all. As your eyes adjust, you take in the details. The walls are wattle and daub, wooden sticks interwoven and plastered with a mix of clay, straw, and yes, animal dung. It's surprisingly effective at keeping out drafts, though not the smell. The thatched roof above you bristles with layers of straw bound so thick that, if you squint, it looks alive. You crouch near the hearth, trying to coax more flame from the embers. The woman passes you a bundle of dry reeds, and you feed them into the coals. The smoke fills the hut instantly, making your eyes water. She waves her hand lazily toward a small hole in the roof. "That's the chimney," she says, almost proud. "It's not a chimney, it's a wish." Historians still argue whether medieval huts were as suffocatingly smoky as travelers described, but your lungs are voting yes. You cough until your ribs ache, and the woman just chuckles softly. "You'll get used to it," she says. "We all do." Outside, the sounds of the village drift in, hammering, voices, the rhythmic slosh of buckets at the well. You realize that privacy doesn't exist here. Every sound, every argument, every secret leaks through walls and smoke. It's communal living in the rawest sense. You sit near the doorway, watching as the woman works. She dips strips of linen into a clay bowl of animal fat, then twists them tightly and sets them aside. Candles. Or, more precisely, rushlights, thin reeds coated in tallow that burn quick and unevenly. You ask if she sells them. "No," she says, "they keep us from walking into walls." A sudden gust blows through the cracks, scattering ash and straw. You shiver. She notices and tosses a ragged blanket toward you. It's heavy, coarse, and smells like sheep. Still, it's a kindness and you pull it tight. The fibers itch, but at least you can feel your fingers again. You glance around and notice something odd. The floor slopes slightly downward toward a shallow trench running along one side of the hut. "That's for the rain," she says, noticing your gaze. "When it pours, we let the water through instead of fighting it." You think about that for a moment, the logic of surrender. Maybe that's the secret of medieval living. You don't conquer nature, you make terms with it. You hear a scratching sound behind you and turn to see a child, small, wide-eyed, hair like tangled straw, peering out from under a blanket. "He's shy," the woman murmurs, "but curious about new faces." The boy grins suddenly, revealing teeth like pearls in a sea of dirt. He giggles at your boots again. Apparently, footwear is the day's entertainment. The woman serves a wooden bowl of stew and gestures for you to eat. It's thick with barley and cabbage, flavored faintly with salt and smoke. You take a cautious sip, expecting blandness, but it's warm and surprisingly filling. Hunger, you realize, is the best seasoning. As you eat, she talks about the harvest, how last year's rains ruined half the crop, how the Lord still demanded his share regardless. There's no bitterness in her voice, just weary acceptance. The rhythm of her speech reminds you of the wind, steady, uncomplaining, endless. You look up at the thatch above you. Tiny bits of straw drift down every time someone moves outside. You wonder how long it takes before the roof simply caves in. She notices your gaze again. "Every spring we patch it," she says. "Or try to." A flea bites your ankle and you slap at it instinctively. Too late. The woman laughs softly. "Don't bother," she says. "They were here first." You grimace but can't help smiling. At least she's honest. The boy crawls closer, watching you eat. He whispers something about fairies living in the forest. You nod solemnly and his eyes light up. Maybe belief is the one thing that makes childhood the same in every century. As the fire crackles, the smoke thickens again, curling lazily toward the roof hole. The woman crosses herself out of habit, then murmurs, "It's good luck when the smoke goes straight up." You glance at the lazy swirl drifting sideways and choose not to comment. Outside, you hear the church bell again, 3 slow, deliberate tones. The woman sighs and rises. "Work time," she says. You follow her outside, blinking into the harsh daylight. The village looks different now that you've warmed up a little. Less alien, more alive. You notice the subtle beauty in the chaos, the glint of frost on hay, the shimmer of sunlight through wood smoke, the rhythm of life too ordinary to be written about. You take one last look at the hut, the straw roof, the crooked walls, the smoke curling upward like a prayer. It's not much, but it's home for someone. Maybe even for you, if you can make it through the day. The rooster crows again, later this time, though no one needs the reminder. The village is already alive with motion. You rub sleep from your eyes, step outside, and instantly feel the cold sting your skin. The ground is slick with last night's frost, glimmering faintly in the weak morning light. Your breath floats before you like smoke. The woman from the hut waves you over with a half-empty bucket. "To the well," she says simply. You follow, your boots squelching in the mud. The path is narrow, bordered by tangled fences of woven branches that lean inward as if conspiring. Somewhere, a cow moos, long and low. At the well, a small line has already formed. 3 women, a stooped old man, and a boy half asleep. Everyone carries a bucket, jug, or patched leather pouch. The water isn't clean, but it's the water. You lower the rope, feeling the weight tug as the bucket sinks into darkness. When you haul it up, your hands burn from the rope's coarse fibers. The woman dips her cup in first and drinks deeply, sighing with satisfaction. You try a sip yourself. It's cold, fresh, even, but faintly metallic, like earth and stone mixed with time. "Good year," she says, nodding. "Not much sickness yet." That word hangs in the air like a warning. As you walk back, villagers scatter into their daily rhythms. A young man repairs a cartwheel using nothing but a hammer and patience. 2 children chase a goat, shrieking with laughter. A woman kneels by a doorway, milking a cow with methodical rhythm. The sound of liquid hitting the bucket is strangely soothing, steady, predictable. You realize how much of life here depends on rhythm. The village breathes in chores and exhales exhaustion. Everyone moves with quiet efficiency, as if they were born knowing their role. You, however, are an interruption, a blank slate in a world that doesn't have time for blank slates. The man who led you to your hut yesterday appears again. "You've hands, don't you?" he says gruffly. "The field needs them." He tosses you a crude wooden rake and starts walking. You follow, tripping over the uneven ground. Beyond the village, the fields stretch outward in long, uneven strips. They aren't neatly fenced or uniform, just rough patches of earth carved out by generations of labor. The soil is dark and heavy, still wet from the night's frost. The man hands you a hoe and points toward a row of turnips. "Dig and turn," he says. "No rocks left." You try, but the first strike sends a jolt through your arms. The handle's rough, the soil unforgiving. The man laughs, not cruelly, but knowingly. "You'll blister by midday," he predicts. Everyone does their first week. Your back aches within minutes. The cold that numbed your hands now bites deep into your fingers. Still, you keep going. The steady thud of tools, the rhythm of breath and earth. It's almost meditative. For a moment, you forget the discomfort. A few rows away, a group of women works in silence, their skirts muddied and faces streaked with dirt. Every so often, one hums a tune, a haunting, wordless melody that floats over the fields. You catch fragments of it and feel an odd calm. It's music made of survival. The man pauses, leaning on his rake. "Harvest comes soon," he says, half to himself. "If the Lord doesn't take too much, we'll eat this winter." You glance toward the manor on the hill, a distant shadow of stone, faintly visible through the morning haze. "Do they ever come down here?" you ask. He smirks. "Only to take." Historians still argue whether the feudal system was exploitation or mutual dependence, but from the way his jaw tightens, you don't need a lecture. You can feel the answer in the dirt under your fingernails. As the sun rises higher, the frost melts into mud. Your boots grow heavier with each step. The woman from the hut joins you with a woven basket strapped to her back. "Careful," she says, watching your awkward rhythm. "You'll hurt yourself." She demonstrates, driving the hoe into the soil with a smooth, practiced motion. Years of repetition turned into instinct. You mimic her and slowly it starts to work. Not well, but enough. Sweat beads on your forehead despite the cold. You glance up and catch a glimpse of children playing near the treeline, their laughter mingling with the caw of crows. Even here, amid endless labor, life finds its small joys. Around midday, the bell from the chapel rings once, lunch, or something like it. The villagers drop their tools and gather near a fallen log. A woman hands out chunks of dark bread and onions, while another pours ale into wooden mugs. You sit among them, grateful for any excuse to rest. The bread is dense, hard enough to test your teeth. The ale is weak but refreshing, slightly sour from unfiltered yeast. You chew slowly, feeling the texture of the bread turn gritty between your teeth. The man beside you grins. "Bit of millstone in it," he says, laughing. "That's what keeps the teeth short." You manage a smile, but you can't ignore the hunger gnawing inside you. Still, the villagers seem content. They talk softly about weather, rumors, and the occasional miracle, like the time a cow supposedly gave birth to twins. No one doubts the tale. The medieval world runs on stories as much as on sweat. A young woman passes a small loaf to an older man who's clearly too tired to fetch his own. No words, no ceremony, just quiet kindness. You realize that even here, in a life defined by hardship, empathy survives like a stubborn weed between stones. After a brief rest, everyone returns to work. The rhythm resumes, steady and relentless. You notice how each villager knows precisely how much effort to give, never more, never less. It's a kind of wisdom born from exhaustion. By late afternoon, your arms feel like lead, your palms blistered and raw. You straighten up, stretching your back, and glance toward the horizon. The sun is already dipping low, casting the fields in shades of bronze and shadow. The man nods toward you. "Not bad for a first day," he says, his tone somewhere between approval and pity. "You might even make it through the week, if your soft hands don't fall off first." You laugh weakly, unsure whether it's a compliment or a warning. As you trudge back toward the village, your legs heavy with mud, you realize something simple and profound. In a place where every breath, every bite, and every moment of warmth must be earned, survival itself is a full-time job. By the time you reach the edge of the village again, the air smells faintly of smoke and stew. A soft orange light glows from the cracks in cottage doors, and the muffled hum of evening chores drifts through the chill. Your arms feel like they've been traded for sacks of stone, your fingers trembling from both cold and fatigue. The woman, Marion, she tells you now, beckons you inside. "You did well enough," she says, though her voice carries that medieval blend of kindness and practicality. "But don't expect pity. Tomorrow will be worse." You can only nod. She ladles a thick, grayish soup into a wooden bowl. The aroma is earthy, comforting, onions, a hint of cabbage, and perhaps a sliver of pork if you're lucky. You taste it carefully. It's warm, bland, and absolutely heavenly after a day of mud and cold. "Don't eat too fast," Marion warns, tearing her own piece of bread in half. "You'll make yourself sick. First time always does." She's right. You can feel your stomach trying to decide whether to thank you or revolt. Outside, the night deepens. The wind rattles the wooden shutters, and the fire's glow flickers against the rough stone walls. A child yawns somewhere behind the partition curtain, and you hear a faint prayer in Latin, words recited from memory rather than belief. Religion here isn't luxury, it's insurance. You glance toward the ceiling, noticing bundles of herbs hanging from beams. "Keeps the evil out," Marion says, following your gaze. "And the smell if you're lucky." Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly believed in magic or simply used superstition as survival psychology, but to Marion, there's no line between the two. When she sprinkles salt near the hearth, you sense she's protecting more than just her home from mice. After dinner, she hands you a wool blanket that smells faintly of smoke and hay. "Sleep near the fire," she says. "Not too close, though. You'll wake up roasted." You lie down on the rough straw mat, the crackle of flames your lullaby. Your muscles protest every movement, but exhaustion wins. The next thing you know, morning light seeps through the gaps in the shutters. The world outside has changed. The frost has melted into slick, sticky mud, and the air hums with flies already drawn to the compost piles. Marion's son, barely 10, runs past holding a bundle of kindling. "Fetch water," she calls after him. Then she glances at you. "You'll help with the thatch today." Roof's leaking again. You step outside and see a group of men balancing on ladders, replacing bundles of straw atop a cottage roof. It's slow, precarious work. The ladders creak, the straw sheds dust that drifts like gold in the light. You join them, awkwardly passing fresh bundles upward. Hold steady, one man says, squinting down at you. You drop that, and we'll be bathing in rain tonight. You nod, gripping the straw tight, feeling tiny cuts forming on your palms. Medieval work doesn't forgive clumsiness. As you work, the village buzzes with activity. The blacksmith's hammer rings out from the far end, a deep metallic rhythm. Smoke pours from his forge as he pounds glowing metal into a crude horseshoe. Each clang echoes through the valley. Nearby, a woman spins wool with rhythmic patience, her spindle twisting like magic in her fingers. She hums softly, a tune that seems older than memory. You notice her lips move as she counts under her breath, measuring each twist. A group of children sits nearby, watching her with wide eyes. Will we ever go to the city? One asks. She chuckles. If you're lucky. Or unlucky. Depends who you ask. You glance toward the distant horizon. The thought of city life seems like fantasy here, yet you can almost imagine it. Stone walls, markets, noise. Still, the villagers talk about cities the way sailors talk about storms. Dangerous, fascinating, better admired from afar. One man working beside you wipes his brow. They say in the city, rats grow as big as cats, he mutters. And people still live shoulder to shoulder like pigs. He spits into the dirt, disgusted. I'll take mud over plague any day. He's not wrong. The Black Death may have passed decades ago, but stories of it linger in every whisper. You can almost feel its ghost, fear still woven into daily habits, from washing hands before eating to burning herbs near sickbeds. You ask if many here still get sick. The man laughs bitterly. Always someone coughing, always someone dying. But we live, don't we? He grins, showing a gap where a tooth once was. We're too stubborn not to. By midday, you've learned the rhythm of thatching, tie, pass, press, repeat. The sun breaks through for a rare moment, and everyone pauses, faces tilted toward the warmth. It's fleeting but glorious. For people who live in mud and shadow, sunlight feels like a blessing worth worshipping. When you finally climb down, your arms shake from exhaustion. Marion waves you toward the stream. Wash, she says. And keep your mouth shut while you do. You obey, splashing your face with the cold, cloudy water. The shock wakes you fully, though the smell isn't pleasant. A boy nearby laughs, his bare feet sinking into the mud. City folk can't stand the smell, he teases. We smell like life. You grin despite yourself. Maybe he's right. It's the scent of existence, raw, unfiltered, unrelenting. As you return to the village, the bell rings again, once, then twice. A small crowd gathers near the chapel. Someone's goat has gone missing, and half the village joins the search as if it were a family member. You follow, amused by the sense of unity in crisis. They find the goat tangled in a hedge, unharmed but thoroughly annoyed. Laughter erupts, genuine and contagious. The tension of the day breaks for a moment, replaced by simple relief. That evening, as you sit by the fire again, Marion tells you about a monk who once passed through the village selling holy charms made of pressed wax and hair. Said they kept nightmares away, she recalls, shaking her head. Didn't keep him from catching a fever, though. You both laugh softly. The fire crackles, and outside, the wind whispers through the eaves. You realize that in this world, humor isn't luxury, it's armor. Before you drift off, you catch yourself thinking how remarkable it is that people here manage to laugh at all. With so little, they still find warmth, not just in the fire, but in each other. You pull the rough blanket tighter, listening to the rain beginning to fall against the thatch you helped repair. It holds steady. You smile faintly. Maybe, just maybe, you're starting to belong, at least for tonight. Morning greets you not with birdsong, but with the rhythmic creak of a cartwheel and the groan of timber outside. You blink yourself awake, the straw mat clinging to your clothes, and realize Marion's already up. Of course she is. She's kneeling by the hearth, stirring a pot that smells faintly of barley and smoke. You'll go with Tomas today, she says without looking up. He's taking grain to the mill. You'll learn how bread earns its soul. You nod, not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds important. Outside, Tomas, the man who first dragged you to the fields, stands beside an old ox cart loaded with rough burlap sacks. The ox itself looks half asleep, its breath puffing clouds into the morning chill. "Climb up," Tomas grunts. "It's not far, but it'll feel like it." The cart lurches forward, wooden wheels squealing against the ruts. You hold on as the path snakes past the edge of the village and into a stretch of open countryside. Low hills roll in the distance, dotted with patches of woodland and crumbling stone walls, the ghosts of forgotten boundaries. As you travel, Tomas hums a slow, tuneless melody, tapping the reins idly. "You've done field work now," he says. "That's the muscle of life. But this is its breath." He gestures toward the sacks of grain. No mill, no bread. No bread, no village. The path eventually narrows beside a stream, its water rushing pale and fast from the hills. And there, ahead of you, rises the mill, a squat, circular tower of stone with a thatched roof that spins lazily in the wind. The great wooden wheel beside it churns the water into foam. The sound is hypnotic, a deep, steady thrum that feels like the heartbeat of the land itself. You jump down as Tomas shouts a greeting to the miller, a burly man with flour dusting his beard like snow. "Another batch for grinding," Tomas calls. The miller waves, his hands rough and ghost-white from years of handling grain. "Bring it in. And mind the gears." Inside, the air is thick with dust. Sunlight filters through narrow slits, catching swirling motes of flour. The noise is deafening, a continuous rumble punctuated by the grind of stone on stone. The great millstones turn with relentless rhythm, powered by the water outside. Tomas empties a sack into the wooden hopper, and you watch the golden stream of grain vanish between the spinning stones. A moment later, a cloud of flour bursts out below, coating everything in a fine powder. You cough, waving the air. The miller laughs. "First-timer's lungs. You'll get used to it, or die trying." Historians still argue whether medieval milling was a privilege or a burden, since millers often charged hefty tolls for their services. Tomas clearly sees it as a necessary evil. "He takes one measure in 20 for himself," he mutters, glancing at the miller. "But he keeps the flour flowing. So we pretend not to mind." The miller catches the comment and grins. "Without me, you'd be chewing pebbles," he shouts over the roar of the stones. "And without us, you'd be rich." Tomas fires back. The banter is good-natured, but there's an edge beneath it, a quiet resentment that everyone seems to live with. You help carry freshly ground flour into sacks. It's lighter now, but it clings to your skin, sneaking into your hair and nostrils. Your clothes look ghostly, pale and powder-soft. "You look like a spirit," the miller jokes, handing you a chunk of coarse bread. "Here, taste what you helped make." You bite into it. It's dry but satisfying, nutty and rough, flecked with bits of bran and grit. "Good?" the miller asks proudly. You nod. He chuckles. "It'll break your teeth before your will." Outside, you hear a sudden commotion. A dog barking, voices raised. You and Tomas rush to the door. A man in a gray cloak stands by the ox cart, inspecting the sacks. He wears a small silver cross and carries a leather pouch at his belt. "Tithe collector," Tomas mutters under his breath. The man's tone is polite but sharp. "The Lord's do share," he says, holding out a hand. "By weight and faith." Tomas clenches his jaw but says nothing. He unties one of the sacks and pours a careful portion into the collector's pouch. "For the church," Tomas says flatly. The man smiles thinly. "For your soul." As he walks away, Tomas exhales hard. "They never forget, do they?" he says. "Rain, frost, famine, doesn't matter. The Lord eats before we do." He spits into the dirt. You ride back in silence for a while. The windmill fades behind you, the fields opening once more into a familiar patchwork of green and brown. A hawk circles above, its shadow gliding over the cart. Halfway home, Tomas gestures toward a small stone cross by the roadside, half swallowed by grass. "Plague marker," he explains. "Old one. My grandfather said bodies were buried there when the sickness came." His voice softens. "They burned the houses too. Said it was the only way to stop it." You shiver, though the air isn't that cold. Death here isn't distant. It's woven into the landscape like thread in cloth. Every village carries its ghosts quietly. When you return, Marion meets you with a nod. "You flower on your face," she says, half amused. "Now you look like the rest of us." She takes one of the sacks and begins kneading dough with her strong hands, the rhythm sure and steady. "We'll bake tonight," she adds. "You'll see what patience tastes like." That evening, the whole cottage smells of warm bread, the kind that makes your chest ache with hunger even before you taste it. You sit near the fire as Marion pulls a loaf from the oven, its crust dark and cracked. She taps it with her knuckle, listening for the hollow sound that means it's done. When she breaks it open, steam curls into the air, carrying the scent of roasted grain and smoke. You tear off a piece, too hot to hold, and take a bite. It's simple but perfect: earth, water, fire, and time. Marion watches you with a faint smile. "Now you understand why we call bread sacred," she says quietly. "It's not just food, it's proof that we lived long enough to bake it." You chew slowly, letting her words settle. For the first time since you arrived, you don't feel like an outsider watching history, you feel like you're breathing it. The bread lingers on your tongue the next morning, warm, yeasty, faintly smoky. But the sweetness of that memory vanishes the moment you step outside. The smell hits you first, sour, thick, alive. The midden heap. Every village has one. A towering mound of rotting straw, broken pottery, manure, and yesterday's dinner scraps. It steams faintly in the morning chill, releasing a perfume only the medieval world could love. Marion wrinkles her nose as she hands you a shovel. "Today's your turn." You hesitate, half hoping she's joking. She isn't. "Waste feeds the next harvest," she says matter-of-factly. "Nothing dies here without purpose." You trudge toward the heap, the mud sucking at your boots. The smell grows worse with every step. You stab the shovel into the pile, turning the muck. Steam rises, warm, damp, and pungent enough to sting your eyes. Somewhere beneath it, something moves. You decide not to investigate. "Keep your mouth closed," Tomas shouts from across the yard, laughing. "You'll swallow more history than you want." As awful as the task is, it's necessary. The waste will be spread across the fields later, a fertilizer richer than gold to these people. You begin to see the strange cycle of the village. Nothing wasted, everything reused, even filth reborn as food. Historians still argue whether medieval people were truly filthy or simply practical by necessity. Looking at your mud-splattered hands, you suspect the truth lies somewhere between. Hygiene here isn't about cleanliness, it's about survival efficiency. After a few hours of turning compost and swatting flies, Marion waves you over. "Enough of that," she says. "We've another job, washing." You follow her and two other women to the stream, where flat stones line the bank like makeshift tables. Each woman carries a basket overflowing with linens and tunics, stiff with dirt. They kneel, dip the fabric in the icy water, and beat it rhythmically with smooth paddles. You join in, awkwardly copying their motions. Your fingers go numb instantly, the cold biting deep into your bones. "Harder," Marion says, grinning. "Pretend it insulted you." You laugh, the sound echoing down the stream. For once, even labor feels lighthearted. One of the women, Agnes, leans toward you. "You know the abbess up north says soap is a sin?" she whispers conspiratorially. "Pride of the flesh," she calls it. Marion snorts. Then she's never washed a shepherd's tunic. You learn that soap, when it's used at all, is made from animal fat and ashes. A gray, greasy substance that smells faintly of smoke and tallow. It doesn't lather so much as smear, but it works. Sort of. The women scrub, rinse, and wring with relentless energy, gossiping all the while about births, lost chickens, and rumors from the next village. A cowherd passes on the road above, shouting a greeting. "Watch out for leeches," he teases. The women laugh, but you check the water nervously anyway. Marion chuckles. "If they bite you, it's a blessing," she says. "Better your blood in the river than in your head." The logic doesn't help. Still, the work becomes rhythmic, almost soothing. The splash of water, the slap of fabric, the women's laughter. It's a melody of labor. You catch yourself smiling despite the chill. When the washing is done, the women spread the wet clothes on bushes and low branches to dry. The sunlight filters through the fabric, making a patchwork of pale colors across the meadow. For a brief moment, the village looks almost beautiful, like a painting in motion. You sit on a stone, catching your breath, watching the clouds drift overhead. Marion hands you a piece of cheese wrapped in cloth. "Not bad for a day's work," she says. "You're learning." You take a bite, sharp, salty, with a hint of sourness. The flavor is strong, almost shocking after days of bland broth and bread. "Made this ourselves," she says proudly. "From old milk. Nothing goes to waste." As you chew, a man walks past leading a thin, bleeding goat. "She's sick again," he mutters. Marion frowns. "Give her garlic and ashen water. If that fails, send for Father Hugh." You blink. "The priest." She nods. "He knows herbs better than half the healers." You recall hearing that priests and monks often served as early physicians, studying old Roman texts on medicine. Historians still debate how much they truly understood about illness, but when your village has no doctor, faith and folklore are medicine enough. By afternoon, clouds gather thick and gray over the hills. A light drizzle begins, turning the dirt road into slippery clay. "Get the clothes in," Marion shouts. Everyone rushes to collect the damp linens, laughing as the rain soaks them anyway. You grab an armful and dash for the cottages, slipping once in the mud but managing to save most of it. When it's over, you're drenched, filthy, but exhilarated. The villagers huddle inside, steam rising from their soaked clothes as they gather near the fire. Marion pours hot broth into wooden bowls, passing them around. "Rain or shine we live," she says with a shrug. "And tomorrow we do it again." The others nod. No one complains. This is simply life. Hard, repetitive, honest. The kind that wears you down and builds you up at the same time. As the evening deepens, the storm outside turns to steady drizzle. The sound of rain on thatch becomes a lullaby, soft and hypnotic. Marion hums a tune you've heard before, low, wordless, almost mournful. You lean back against the wall, eyes half closed, letting the warmth of the fire seep into your bones. Somewhere beyond the village, a wolf howls. The room falls silent for a heartbeat, everyone listening. Then the sound fades and the chatter resumes. No fear, just quiet acknowledgement. Danger here isn't unusual, it's simply part of the night's music. You drift toward sleep, thinking of how far you've come from your own world of light switches and screens. Here, the dark is total, the quiet, absolute. And yet you feel strangely safe. The rain whispers, the fire cracks, and your heartbeat slows to match the rhythm of the village. You wake to the smell of wet earth and wood smoke. The storm has passed, leaving behind a thin fog that clings low over the fields. The air feels cleaner somehow, washed of yesterday's noise and labor. You stretch, wincing at the familiar ache in your shoulders. Even your blisters have blisters now. Marion hands you a crust of bread and a small wooden cup of ale. "Breakfast," she says. "Light day today. We're going to market." You blink. Market. The word feels almost exotic after so many days trapped in the village rhythm. "Aye," she replies. "Every few weeks, we trade what little we have for what we don't." You follow her down the main dirt track that snakes toward the open fields. Tomas joins, leading a small cart piled with woven baskets, eggs, onions, and a single chicken that looks more insulted than alive. "Try not to lose anything," he says. "Especially yourself." The road winds through shallow valleys dotted with other travelers, farmers pushing carts, monks walking in pairs, a woman carrying cheese wheels in a sack. Everyone nods politely as they pass. The sound of wagon wheels and quiet chatter fills the crisp air. After about an hour, you see it, a cluster of tents and wooden stalls rising from the meadow like a makeshift village. The market. It's chaos, but a living kind, goats bleating, chickens flapping, traders shouting prices, children darting through the crowd. Smoke from cooking fires mingles with the scent of baked bread, leather, and sweat. For the first time since arriving here, You see faces you don't recognize. Some wear brighter clothes, dyed fabrics in faded reds and greens. Others carry tools or knives that look finer than anything in your village. Town folk, Marion mutters. Think they're clever. You trail behind as she sets up her small stall, a blanket on the ground displaying onions, coarse cloth, and 2 small jugs of ale. You'll watch the goods, she says. And no, you can't drink the ale. Tomas wanders off to talk with a man selling plowshares. You watch as people haggle, laugh, argue. Coins change hands, but so do promises. Barter is still the true language here. A woman trades 3 eggs for a length of wool thread. Another swaps dried herbs for a jar of honey. A boy your age, perhaps a bit younger, approaches Marion's stall. He picks up an onion, sniffs it, and frowns. Small, he says. Half price. Marion doesn't blink. Then by half, she replies. The boy grins and pays full. You try not to laugh. Markets are for stories as much as trade, she tells you once he's gone. You listen more than you buy. She's right. Everywhere around you, news flows, whispers about distant wars, a noble scandal, a poor harvest 2 villages over. History in its rawest form, rumor. You overhear a traveling merchant talking about a great cathedral being built in the city. Stone so tall, he says proudly, that clouds rest on its roof. Another man scoffs. And rain leaks through the cracks, no doubt. They laugh, clinking mugs. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly felt awe for such cathedrals or simply saw them as the Lord's monuments to vanity. Listening now, you sense both admiration and skepticism woven together like a worn tapestry. As the morning turns to afternoon, Marion sends you to fetch water. You make your way through the crowd to a communal barrel where travelers fill their cups. A man in a long cloak stands nearby, his belt heavy with small glass vials. For the body and spirit, he says in a sing-song voice. Cures for coughs, balms for bruises, love potions if you dare. You realize he's a peddler, a traveling merchant of curiosities. His table is cluttered with dried herbs, colored stones, and tiny scrolls sealed with wax. You pick one up, curious. What's this, you ask? Mandrake root, he whispers dramatically. Pull it wrong and it screams. You blink. He smiles. Don't worry, I've already done the screaming. Marion finds you a moment later and swats your arm. Don't talk to charm sellers, she warns. They'll sell you moonlight if you let them. Still, you can't help glancing back at the peddler's strange little world of secrets. By midday, the market is at its peak. Music drifts from a pair of traveling minstrels, a flute and drum echoing across the square. Children dance barefoot in the dirt. A baker hands out broken crusts to anyone who looks hungry. The smell of roasting meat makes your stomach twist with longing. Marion trades 2 onions and a jug of ale for a small packet of salt, a rare luxury. She holds it like treasure. Worth more than silver, she says softly. Keeps food from rotting. Keeps people alive. You help her pack up as the sky begins to shift toward gold. The market starts to thin, traders load their carts, children chase the last crumbs, dogs sniff for scraps. The walk home feels longer, heavier, but peaceful. As you near the village, you spot something new. A man standing by the chapel door, dressed in a simple robe, his hair tonsured in the monk style. Father Hugh, you assume, the healer Marion mentioned. He's speaking softly with a woman cradling a child. The boy's face is pale, his breath shallow. Hugh murmurs a prayer, then reaches into a pouch for a small bundle of herbs. Marion pauses, watching. That's who you go to when fever comes, she whispers. He prays first. Mixes plants second. Never the other way around. You nod, though a flicker of unease passes through you. Faith and medicine live side by side here, but neither seems to fully trust the other. When you finally reach home, the sun has dipped below the trees. You unload the day's spoils. Salt, a few dried apples, a scrap of blue fabric Marion bought just for the joy of it. She spreads it flat and runs her fingers over it like it's silk. Too fine for peasants, she says with a wink. All the better, then. Dinner is simple, bread dipped in broth, but the mood is lighter. The market has fed more than bodies, it's fed spirits. Tomas tells stories about a juggler who claimed he once performed for a king. Marion scoffs. And now he performs for chickens. Everyone laughs. As the night settles in, you step outside for a breath of air. The village is quiet again, shadows stretching long and soft. The moon hangs low, reflecting off puddles like fragments of silver. Somewhere in the distance, you can still hear faint music from the direction of the market, echoes of a world larger than this one, but somehow connected to it. For a long moment, you stand there, breathing in the scent of damp hay and distant firelight, and you think, maybe you wouldn't last a day here, but somehow, you already have. Morning comes slower this time. The faint gray light slips through the shutters, and you're half tempted to ignore it, to pretend you've earned one more hour of rest. But in a medieval village, rest isn't something you earn. It's something the weather decides for you. The air feels damp, heavy with mist that clings to your clothes the moment you step outside. The whole world seems muffled, the distant bleat of goats, the soft chatter of hens, the rhythmic thunk of an axe on wood. You find Tomas splitting logs behind the cottage, his breath fogging in the cool air. Fuel for winter, he says, lifting another piece. The coal doesn't wait for anyone. He hands you a smaller hatchet. You'll help. You try. You really do. The first few swings jar your arms all the way to your shoulders, sending a tremor through your bones. The wood barely cracks. Tomas watches with that amused smirk people get when they see someone born centuries too late. Don't fight it, he advises. Let the axe do the work. Once you find the rhythm, lift, drop, split, it becomes almost meditative. The scent of fresh wood rises with every strike, and for a brief moment, it feels peaceful. But that illusion breaks the moment the wind shifts, bringing with it the unmistakable smell of something burning, not firewood but thatch. Marion's shout confirms it. Fire! At the mill! Everyone runs. Buckets appear from nowhere, feet pounding on the muddy track as villagers rush toward the riverbank. You follow, breath burning in your chest. The old mill looms ahead, smoke curling from the roof like a dark ghost. Flames lick at the edges of the thatch, crackling hungrily. There's no fire brigade, no hoses, no alarm bells. Just people, dozens of them, forming a desperate line from the river to the mill, passing buckets hand to hand. You grab one, slosh water into the inferno, and immediately grab another. The heat stings your face, the smoke blinds your eyes. Someone shouts that the flour sacks are catching. Another curses the miller for leaving a candle near the grain bins. You can barely see Tomas through the haze, his face streaked with soot. Keep going, he yells. Don't stop. For a terrifying moment, it feels hopeless. The roof creaks, sending sparks flying into the dark sky. You think of how easily one spark could spread, to cottages, to barns, to the entire village. Then, as suddenly as it began, the fire weakens. The buckets keep coming, faster now. The flames shrink, hiss, and finally sputter out into steam. The villagers stand in silence, panting, faces glowing orange from the dying embers. Marion wipes her brow. Saints be praised, she murmurs. That could have been the end of us. You realize how fragile everything is here, how one mistake, one gust of wind, could erase a whole community. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants felt secure in their world or constantly feared divine punishment. Watching them now, mud-streaked, exhausted, and somehow still joking, you sense both. Faith and fear were neighbors. As the smoke clears, the miller, an older man with trembling hands, kneels beside the charred beams, muttering prayers. It's not all gone, Tomas says quietly. We'll rebuild. And they do. By noon, hammers are swinging, hands are sawing, children are hauling straw. You help where you can, though your arms feel like lead. There's no concept of someone else's problem. Here, everything is everyone's. While the work continues, Marion tells you about another fire years ago, one that started in the Lord's hall during a feast. Burned half his tapestries, she says. He said it was a sign from heaven. I said it was a drunk night with a candle. You laugh, though your throat still aches from smoke. In the afternoon, Father Hugh arrives, blessing the rebuilt frame with a sprig of holy water. He murmurs a Latin prayer, his voice low and melodic. Dominus custodiet. The villagers bow their heads, though you notice some still glance nervously at the blackened wood. Faith can't erase memory that easily. Later, as the sky softens to amber, Tomas hands you a cup of watered ale. You did well, he says. Most people faint the first time. You grin weakly. Thanks, I guess. He chuckles. Fire's a strange thing. Feeds us, warms us, and kills us just the same. You sip in silence. The warmth of the cup seeps into your fingers, but the thought lingers. Everything here exists on the edge of survival. Everyday balance between too much rain, too little food, too much heat, too little mercy. That night, the village gathers again, not for work, but to celebrate surviving another crisis. Someone lights a small, controlled fire in the center of the clearing, and everyone sits around it. The flames dance, casting long shadows that flicker against the faces around you. A man begins to tell stories, half legend, half memory. He speaks of dragons sleeping beneath hills, of knights who never returned, of saints who made rivers run backward. Children listen wide-eyed. Adults nod as if they've heard it all before. You realize these stories are their entertainment, their history, and their hope all rolled together. Then, one of the older women stands and begins to sing, a slow, haunting tune that rises like smoke. Her voice cracks with age, but it carries power. The words are in a dialect you can't quite catch, but the feeling is unmistakable, sorrow and endurance woven together like twine. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. For a moment, you forget the fire, the aching muscles, the endless labor. The world narrows to that voice, that fire, that shared breath of survival. When the song fades, silence fills the air. Then someone laughs softly, and the moment breaks. The villagers drift home one by one, their shadows merging with the dark. You stand last, watching the embers dim. They pulse faintly in the night, each spark a reminder that life here burns bright only because it's constantly on the verge of going out. Tomorrow will come with more work, more aches, more ordinary miracles of endurance. But tonight, the village sleeps, scarred, smoky, and still standing. You wake before dawn this time, not because anyone shakes you, but because the sound of bells carries through the mist, low, distant, and solemn. The rhythm is slow and steady, unlike the cheerful chime that marks feast days. This is different. This is morning. You step outside into the gray chill. The village feels quieter than usual, even the animals subdued. Tomas and Marian stand near the path, both dressed in their best, meaning their least mended, clothes. Who? You begin, but Marian answers softly before you finish. Old Gareth, the shepherd, didn't wake up this morning. You remember him, the wiry man with the crooked smile, always muttering to his sheep like they were better company than people. You'd seen him every day on the hill, leaning on his staff, watching the clouds. Now, just like that, he's gone. The villagers gather by the small chapel. Father Hugh stands at the doorway, his breath visible in the cold, a simple wooden cross in his hands. The body lies on a bier, wrapped in linen, face covered. No elaborate coffin, no painted relics. Just cloth, rope, and earth. Death is never unexpected here. It's simply part of the rhythm. Yet, seeing it up close, you feel something stir deep inside you. Not fear exactly, but a quiet recognition. This is the kind of life where death doesn't wait for permission. As the priest begins his prayers in Latin, the villagers murmur the familiar responses. The words mean little to you, but the tone says enough. Sorrow, respect, and resignation. A boy scatters herbs over the linen, sage, rosemary, and a sprig of yarrow. You remember Marian once told you that yarrow confuses evil spirits. Whether that's true or not, no one questions it now. The grave is dug behind the chapel, shallow but neat. Everyone takes a turn tossing in a handful of dirt. When it's your turn, the soil feels cold and damp in your palm. You whisper something you can't quite name and let it fall. Afterward, the villagers linger. Some talk quietly, others stand in silence. Tomas crosses his arms. He was out there every morning before the sun. Never complained once. Marian nods. That's how I want to go. Quiet. In my sleep. Not coughing up half my lungs like poor Brenna last winter. You can't tell if it's gallows humor or genuine comfort, but it's oddly grounding. Here, they face mortality not with denial, but with familiarity. It's not morbid, it's matter-of-fact. Historians still argue whether medieval people feared death more deeply than we do, or whether they simply accepted it sooner. Watching them now, you suspect the latter. When the bell finally stops ringing, life resumes almost immediately. Someone heads to the fields. Another goes to fetch water. Children start a game near the path, laughing as if the funeral had never happened. It's not disrespect, it's survival. Marian turns to you. We've chores to finish. He'd have scolded us if we didn't. You follow her to the pasture, where the sheep graze quietly in the mist. The air smells of wet wool and grass. Without Gareth, the flock seems restless. You help mend the fence while Tomas sharpens a scythe nearby. The scrape of metal against stone is rhythmic, almost hypnotic. As the sun climbs, the mist begins to lift, revealing the rolling hills beyond the village. They stretch endlessly, dotted with tiny cottages and the faint glimmer of a river winding through the valley. You can almost see the world expanding, tiny threads of connection between this place and hundreds like it. Marian wipes her brow. He left no family, just his sheep. We'll take them to the Lord's steward tomorrow. He'll claim them. Something in her voice tightens. Everything we have ends up his, one way or another. You glance toward the manor on the hill, its outline faint through the haze. It looks peaceful from here, but you remember the talk from the market, the taxes, the labor demands, the grain quotas. Life here is never truly your own. After lunch, Father Hugh visits the cottage. He sits by the hearth, sipping broth while discussing the coming winter. Snow early this year, he says. The wind smells northern. He opens a small pouch, sprinkling crushed herbs into the fire. The smoke turns sweet, filling the room with an almost honeyed scent. For protection, he explains. And for peace. You ask about the afterlife, what he believes happens next for someone like Gareth. He smiles faintly. The question every soul asks. I think heaven must smell like fresh bread and clean hay. But perhaps it's just the place where the work finally stops. Marian chuckles softly. Then it won't feel like home. You all laugh, and the warmth returns. Later, Tomas repairs one of the thatch bundles on the roof while you hand him reeds. Funny thing, he says between breaths. When someone dies, the world keeps on turning just the same. Fields don't wait. Cows don't care. Makes you wonder if the world ever notices us at all. You look up at the pale blue sky. Maybe it does. Just quietly. He grins. Quietly's fine by me. Evening falls with a softness you haven't felt in days. The air smells of smoke and damp straw. You sit outside with Marian, watching the last of the light fade. The fields glow gold for a moment, then slip into shadow. Somewhere, a night bird calls. Marian hums a tune you don't recognize. It's a lullaby my mother used to sing, she explains. She said it keeps the dead from wandering too close. You listen in silence. The melody is slow, circular, and oddly soothing, like the rhythm of the world itself. When the final note fades, she sighs. Sleep easy tonight. The dead have already had their turn. You lie down later with the faint echo of her song still in your ears, the scent of herbs still in the air, and the quiet understanding that in a medieval village, even grief is a kind of labor, something shared, something endured, something carried gently into the next morning. The morning breaks crisp and silver, with frost tracing delicate patterns along the edges of every window and fence post. Your breath puffs in small clouds as you step outside, boots crunching on the frozen ground. Winter has announced itself without asking permission. Marian is already up, wrapping a wool shawl around her shoulders. Frost in the morning, mud by noon, she mutters. The season of slipping and swearing. You grin, though your fingers already ache from the cold. The fields that once shimmered with green now lie dull and brittle. The harvest is long done, but the work never ends, it only changes shape. Today, it's about preserving. You help Marian in the cottage, cutting thin strips of meat and laying them over a rack near the hearth. Smoke curls around them slowly, seeping into every fiber. "We'll need this when the snow sets in," she says. "Can't count on the stew pot to stay full come January." The smell is sharp but comforting. Around you, the small room hums with quiet activity. Tomas mending a broken yoke, Marian stirring a pot of thick soup, the fire crackling steadily. Everything feels smaller, closer. Even sound seems muffled, as though the cold has swallowed the edges of the world. Later, Tomas steps outside, muttering something about checking the roof before the snow comes. You follow him, half for company, half because you've learned curiosity is a good teacher here. He points at the thatch overhead, where the frost sparkles like glass. "If you don't patch before the first heavy fall," he says, "you'll wake to snow on your blanket." You imagine that and shudder. "Why not just build with something stronger?" you ask. Tomas chuckles. "Stronger costs silver. Thatch costs time. And we've got plenty of that." You both scrape at the thatch, tightening reeds, replacing loose ones, hands growing numb in the chill. The faint smell of smoke drifts on the wind, reminding you of the fire at the mill. But this time it feels safer, contained. Warmth as friend, not threat. As you work, you glance across the village. Thin trails of smoke rise from chimneys, each one marking a life tucked against the cold. You notice small details now, the shape of every hut, the way paths connect like veins, the sound of a baby crying 2 cottages over, the rhythmic thump of a loom from somewhere unseen. Life goes on even when it slows. Ever wonder how people up north survive? You ask. It must be colder there. Tomas shrugs. They eat more fat, drink more ale, and curse louder. Same as us, just snowier. You laugh, the sound echoing lightly in the quiet air. By midday, Marian calls you back inside. She's set out a small feast, by peasant standards, anyway. A pot of barley stew, a chunk of dark bread, a slice of dried apple. "Eat," she says firmly. "You'll need it when the wind turns cruel." As you eat, she tells you stories about winters past. "There was one year," she says, "when the river froze solid for weeks. We walked across it like it was stone. The mill wheel stopped, the fish died, and half the chickens froze where they stood. You nearly choke on your bread. What did you do?" "Waited," she says simply, "and sang." She means it. She hums again, the same low, winding tune from last night. It weaves through the air like smoke, the rhythm steady, almost hypnotic. You realize it's not just a song, it's survival in melody form. Something to remind them that life continues, even when the world sleeps under snow. Outside, the sky begins to dim earlier than you expect. The sun doesn't set, it retreats, as if tired of watching. By late afternoon, it's already dusk. Tomas lights a tallow candle, its flame dancing wildly at every draft. You can smell the faint sourness of animal fat. It's unpleasant but necessary. Marian wraps her hands around a cup of hot broth. "You'll see what real cold is soon enough," she says, "when the air cuts through cloth like a knife." You glance at the window. Frost is already creeping back along the edges of the glass, delicate as lace. Somewhere outside, a wolf howls, a long, distant sound that raises the hairs on your neck. Marian notices and smiles faintly. "They come close when it's lean," she murmurs. "Don't worry. They prefer sheep to people." "Comforting," you say dryly, and she chuckles. As night settles, Father Hugh stops by again. He carries a small bundle of candles and a prayer book. "The long nights begin soon," he says. "Time to bless the hearths." He sprinkles holy water near the fire, murmuring words that sound ancient, older even than the village itself. Historians still argue whether these rituals were true Christian blessings or older pagan customs that simply put on new names. Watching him, you suspect it doesn't matter. What matters is warmth, light, and the hope that the fire keeps burning. When he leaves, Marian sets another log on the flames and sighs contentedly. The house feels alive again. Tomas nods. The year turns whether we like it or not. You stretch, staring at the firelight flickering against the low ceiling. The warmth feels almost luxurious now, wrapping around you like a heavy blanket. You can hear the faint hum of the wind outside, pressing against the walls but never quite breaking through. As you drift toward sleep, you think about how fragile comfort is here. One bad harvest, one sick cow, 1 week of hard frost, and everything changes. Yet somehow they endure. Maybe not because they're stronger, but because they've learned to find beauty in survival itself. In songs, in smoke, in the soft glow of a single tallow candle. You close your eyes to the crackle of the fire and the low hum of Marion's tune, and for the first time, you realize winter might not be the enemy here. It's simply another test in a world built entirely of them. The first snow arrives without ceremony. You wake to silence, thick, absolute silence. No rooster crowing, no clatter of buckets, not even the usual gossip drifting through the morning air. Just the soft, steady stillness of a world muffled in white. You push open the cottage door, and the cold slaps you awake. The ground is covered in a clean, unbroken blanket of snow. The rooftops are lined with delicate ridges of frost, every branch bent beneath the weight of it. Even the smoke from chimneys rises slower, as if the air itself has thickened. Marion joins you, squinting at the horizon. "Well," she says, "looks like God's gone and dumped his laundry again." You laugh, but your breath turns to fog before you can finish. The village looks almost magical under snow, soft, pristine, untouched. But the beauty fades quickly when you realize what it means. Frozen water barrels, stuck doors, and endless shivering. Tomas is already outside, hacking at a sheet of ice that's sealed the well. "Ain't winter lovely?" he grumbles. You grab a bucket and help him break through. The ice cracks like glass, splintering into jagged shards that glint in the weak light. "Careful," he warns. "Cut yourself on that, and it won't stop bleeding for days." You glance at your red hands and mutter, "Noted." Once the water's fetched, the rest of the morning is spent feeding animals and checking the thatch for leaks. Every step crunches, every breath stings. The sheep huddle close in their pen, breath rising in little clouds. Marion sprinkles a handful of leftover grain near them. "They eat better than we do," she jokes. By midday, snow begins falling again, lazy, fat flakes drifting like feathers. The village slows even further. Fires burn constantly now, smoke curling from every chimney in steady gray ribbons. Inside the cottage, the air feels thick with warmth and the smell of stew, turnips, barley, and whatever scraps of dried meat remain. Marion ladles you a bowl. "Hot food keeps the soul alive," she says. "Cold food just keeps it waiting." You blow on the spoon and take a careful sip. It's simple but comforting. Outside, the snow whispers against the roof. Inside, time seems to stretch. Tomas sits by the fire, mending a leather strap. "Used to think winter was lazy time," he says. "Then I learned it's just a different kind of work." He gestures toward the hearth. Keeping that going is a full-time job. He's not wrong. Every few hours, the fire demands more wood, more attention, more breath. The dance of survival never stops. It just changes partners. You spend the afternoon with Marion, helping her spin wool into yarn. The rhythm of the spindle is soothing, the gentle hum of the thread wrapping around itself endlessly. "This," she says, "is the sound of patience." As the hours pass, you talk. She tells you stories of winters when the snow buried houses to their roofs, of rivers that froze so solid children skated on them with wooden planks strapped to their feet. You ask if she ever left the village, even once. She shakes her head. "The world's wide," she says softly, "but it doesn't need to be for everyone. My life fits right here, like a seed in its furrow." Something about that hits you. Maybe it's the quiet certainty in her voice, or maybe it's the way the firelight softens her face. For her, contentment isn't about having more, it's about surviving what you have with grace. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly accepted their small worlds or simply lacked the imagination to dream beyond them. Listening to Marion, you suspect imagination was never the issue, it was practicality. Dreams don't plow fields. Evening falls early, the light fading to a soft blue glow outside. Snow still drifts steadily, the flakes glittering in the faint light from the window. You step outside for a moment, just to breathe the cold air. It burns your lungs, but it's invigorating. The entire village lies hushed beneath the snow, every roof, every fence, every footprint already vanishing beneath the new layer. The only movement comes from Father Hugh, walking slowly between cottages, a lantern swinging from his hand. He stops at each door, mutters a prayer, and moves on. When he reaches you, he nods. Checking for the sick, he explains. Cold creeps into lungs the way sin creeps into hearts, quietly. You offer him some warmth inside, but he smiles and shakes his head. Not yet. Still a few more doors. The lantern swings again, casting circles of gold in the white gloom. Back inside, Tomas is already snoring lightly in the corner. Marian is stitching a tear in her shawl. The room glows with the faint orange of the fire, shadows moving gently along the walls. It's strange, you whisper, how quiet it gets. She looks up. That's winter's trick, she says. It hushes the world so you can hear yourself think. Outside, the snow deepens. The roof creaks softly now and then, the sound of weight pressing down from above. You pull your blanket tighter and settle near the hearth. The fire hums, the air smells of wood and wool, and the last thing you hear before sleep claims you is Marian's voice, murmuring half a prayer, half a lullaby. Let the cold stay where it falls. Let the fire stay where it glows. And for the first time in days, you sleep without dreaming. The world has changed overnight. The snow that once fell softly has hardened into ice, turning every surface into glass. The paths are slick, the water buckets frozen solid, and your breath feels sharper, like it might shatter if you exhale too quickly. You wake to the sound of Tomas cursing outside. Bloody frost stolen my hammer, he growls. You find him kicking at a small pile of snow beside the shed, which turns out to be his workbench buried in ice. Lost half my tools to this damned winter, he mutters. You help him chip at the frozen crust, your fingers numbing fast despite the wool wrappings. Every movement feels slower now, more deliberate. Even speech seems like effort. Marian appears with a jug of warm water and pours it carefully over your hands. Don't fight the cold, she says. You'll always lose. Learn to move with it. That becomes the rhythm of the day. Slower, quieter, but steady. You haul what's left of the firewood inside, each log heavier than you remember. This'll last 2 days if we're careful, Tomas says. 1 if we're not. He glances at the woods beyond the field, the trees dark and still under the snow. We'll need to fetch more soon. The thought of trekking into the forest in this weather feels unthinkable, but there's no choice. By midday, the 3 of you bundle up in layers, fur collars, rough cloaks, boots stuffed with straw for insulation, and set out. The forest looks like another world entirely. The branches hang low, coated in frost so thick they glitter like silver. Each step crunches beneath your boots, loud in the otherwise perfect silence. You carry the hatchet, Tomas the saw, and Marian the rope. As you walk deeper, the air grows stiller, the world more distant. You notice animal tracks, fox, rabbit, something larger you'd rather not guess. They're hungry too, Tomas murmurs. Everything's hungry this time of year. You reach a fallen tree and begin chopping, the sound echoing through the forest like slow, rhythmic thunder. The wood resists at first, frozen through, but soon gives way under your combined effort. Breath steams in the cold air, mingling with the faint scent of sap and snow. After an hour, you've gathered a modest pile. Tomas lashes the logs together with rope, creating a makeshift sled. You help pull, each step a small victory against the biting wind. By the time the village comes into view, your muscles ache and your face burns with cold. Marian laughs softly. Congratulations, she says. You've survived your first wood run. Most people cry the first time. I might still, you mumble, earning a grin. Back home, the fire greets you like an old friend. You thaw your hands above the flames, watching the color return to your skin. Marian sets a pot of broth to simmer, and the aroma fills the room. That's the reward, she says. Warmth earned the hard way always tastes better. As you eat, Tomas tells a story about the great winter years ago, when the river froze so thick that wolves crossed it freely. We trapped one, he says, eyes gleaming with mischief. Fed us for a week. You choke. You ate a wolf? He shrugs. Better than letting it eat us. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers actually resorted to eating wolves or if such tales were just symbolic stories about resilience. Sitting here listening to Tomas, you suspect it was both, a little truth wrapped in legend. That evening, Father Hugh visits again, this time not with blessings, but with news. There's sickness in the next village, he says gravely. Cough that rattles the lungs. We'll need to keep to ourselves for a while. Marion's expression hardens. Another plague? He shakes his head. Not yet. But the cold makes men weak, and weakness invites worse. After he leaves, the room feels tighter. The silence that follows isn't peaceful, it's wary. You think of how easily illness could sweep through a place like this. One person coughs, and by week's end, the whole village could be buried under both snow and silence. That night, you hear Tomas coughing in his sleep. Just once, but it's enough to twist your stomach. Marion must hear it too, because she stirs, murmuring a prayer under her breath before pulling the blanket higher over his shoulders. You lie awake a long while, listening to the wind howl outside, the walls creaking, and the faint rhythm of two people breathing beside you. The fire has burned low, its last embers glowing faintly red. You realize then that life here isn't measured by the passing of seasons, or even the rising of the sun. It's measured by the persistence of warmth. By how long a fire can last, how long a body can hold off the cold. You get up quietly, feed the fire one more log, and sit beside it until the room glows again. The warmth licks your face, the flames crackling softly. Outside, snow keeps falling, relentless, unending, but for now, inside this small circle of light, you've managed to push winter back, even if only by inches. And that feels like victory. When the cold finally begins to loosen its grip, it doesn't feel like victory, it feels like surrender. The snow recedes into mud, the ice melts into puddles that drown the roads, and everything smells of rot and damp straw. You step outside to the sight of a village half asleep, half awake, tired faces, thin bodies, but the faintest spark of survival in their eyes. Tomas is already outside, splitting the last of the winter logs. His arms look thinner, his face hollowed out by the months of meager meals. We made it, he says simply, pausing to wipe his brow. Almost. The word almost hangs heavy. Because while the world thaws, the hunger doesn't leave so easily. The stores are nearly empty, and what remains is barely edible. Marion scrapes the bottom of a barrel to make a stew from dried beans and a heel of bread. It's called spring hunger, she says with a small, grim smile. You're too weak to work, but you have to work to eat. Outside, the fields are slick with melted snow. The peasants move slowly, breaking the earth with simple wooden plows drawn by weary oxen. You join them, the mud sucking at your boots, each pull heavier than the last. The soil looks dark and fertile, but it hides the struggle of 1,000 generations beneath it, hands blistered, backs bent, prayers whispered for rain and sun in just the right measure. Historians still argue whether peasants starved more in winter or in spring. Marion says beside you, stabbing her hoe into the dirt. I say it's spring. In winter, you expect to be hungry. In spring, you hope not to be, and that hurts worse. The days stretch longer now. The light lingers later into the evening, but it only reveals more work to be done. Chickens cluck again, thin and ragged. Goats wander back from the woods, ribs showing. And yet, the village hums with cautious energy, a kind of stubborn defiance. One morning, Tomas calls you to the riverbank. The ice is gone, the water flowing freely again, and children splash at the edges, laughing. You hear that? He says quietly. That's the sound of life returning. You smile, realizing it's the first laughter you've heard in months. The blacksmith's forge comes alive again, ringing out sharp, rhythmic beats. The baker starts kneading dough, though flour is scarce. The air smells faintly of yeast and ash. Someone plays a pipe near the market square, a thin, trembling melody, but beautiful all the same. There's a festival brewing. You don't believe it at first. How could anyone have energy to celebrate after so much cold and hunger? But humans, you realize, have always been good at pretending things are better than they are. Hope needs little more than an excuse. The entire village gathers for Beltane, the spring fire festival. Marion explains softly, "We burn the old to bless the new. Ashes for luck, flame for life." Bonfires are built at the edge of the fields, wood stacked high, smoke curling toward the darkening sky. You help light one, the sparks leaping upward like fireflies. The villagers cheer as the flames roar to life. Faces glow in the orange light, lined, scarred, smiling. Someone passes you a cup of weak ale, and you drink deeply. It's sour, but it feels warm going down. Musicians strike up a tune, flute, drum, fiddle, and for the first time since arriving, you see real joy. People dance barefoot in the mud, arms linked, laughter rising into the night air. Tomas claps you on the back. "Told you you'd survive," he says with a grin. "Barely," you answer, laughing. He nods. "That's the only way anyone survives here." Later, as the fire burns low, you find yourself sitting beside Marion. She's quiet, watching the sparks fade into embers. "Every year we lose someone," she says. "Sometimes to the cold, sometimes to hunger. But when the fire burns, we remember them. It keeps the sadness away." You look around, the faces illuminated by firelight, the muddy feet, the calloused hands, and it dawns on you, this village isn't defined by misery. It's defined by endurance. A quirky bit of lore comes to mind. You'd once read that medieval people believed fairies danced in the smoke of Beltane fires, carrying away sickness and sorrow. You glance up through the haze and imagine tiny shapes fluttering in the glow. For a moment, the fantasy feels real enough to believe. When the music fades and the fires settle, the villagers drift home one by one. You follow Tomas and Marion back through the muddy path. The sky is streaked with faint light, the first sign of dawn. "Tomorrow we plant," Tomas says, his tone softer now. "New seed, new year." Marion squeezes his hand. "And maybe a better one." Inside, the air still smells of smoke and stew. You sit beside the hearth, the ashes warm beneath your feet. The exhaustion hits you all at once, bone deep, but oddly peaceful. You've survived the coldest season, the hardest work, the darkest nights. You've endured hunger, illness, and fear, and through it all, found slivers of warmth and humanity. And as you close your eyes, you finally understand. You wouldn't last a day in a medieval village not because it's unbearable, but because its people bore the unbearable every day and still found reason to sing. The next morning greets you not with silence or frost, but with the soft murmur of a waking village. Chickens cluck lazily. Someone coughs near the well. Smoke rises from a dozen hearths, thin and blue against a pale sky. It's planting day. You stretch your sore limbs and step outside, blinking at the early light. The mud has dried into cracked patches, and the air carries the faint scent of earth and dew. The world feels fragile, but alive again. Tomas waves you over to the fields, his sleeves rolled up, a wooden plow already waiting. "You've swung axes and hauled logs," he says with a smirk. "Now you'll meet the real work." The oxen snort, stamping impatiently. Their hides glisten with sweat even in the cool morning. You grab the handles, feeling the rough wood bite into your palms as the plow cuts through the earth. It's slow, heavy labor, every step resisted by the soil, but the sound is strangely soothing, the groan of wood, the creak of leather, the steady rhythm of breathing and effort. "Keep your lines straight," Tomas calls. "Crooked furrows bring crooked crops." You laugh, though your arms already ache. "Do you tell the earth jokes like that every year?" He grins. "Only when she's listening." Marion follows behind, scattering seeds from a worn leather pouch, wheat, barley, and the promise of bread months from now. "We trust the ground more than the Lord," she says. "The soil takes, but it gives back if you treat it kindly." As the morning grows warmer, the village turns into a hive of motion. Children run between rows, shouting and laughing. The bell from the church tower tolls slowly, marking the hours, but nobody stops working. The rhythm feels eternal, something ancient and unbroken. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow, noticing the small things you missed before. The tiny blue flowers growing along the fence, the way light glints off the thatch, the distant hum of bees returning to their hives. Life is creeping back into every crack and corner. And yet, beneath the peace, there's still an edge of uncertainty. Marion points to the sky, where a faint halo circles the sun. Weather sign, she murmurs. Could mean rain. Or worse. Historians still argue whether medieval farmers understood weather or just trusted old sayings. You think, watching the clouds drift. But standing here, in this rhythm of breath and soil, you realize that maybe they didn't need science. They had instinct, patience, and each other. By noon, the work slows. Tomas calls a rest, and you all gather by the edge of the field. He pours a bit of ale into the earth before taking a sip himself. For the harvest, he says simply. You follow suit, letting a few drops sink into the dark soil. The ground drinks greedily, as if thirsty for the gesture. Marion passes you a hunk of bread and some soft cheese, the first real meal that doesn't taste like desperation. The flavors are simple, but they fill you with quiet gratitude. Not so bad, is it? Tomas asks. You smile. Only took me a few centuries to get used to it. He laughs, shaking his head. That's all it ever takes. As the day winds down, the fields stretch behind you, fresh furrows, planted hope. The sun dips low, painting the world in amber light. Children chase each other through the fading glow, their laughter echoing against the hills. You walk back through the village, feeling every sound and scent with new awareness. Bread baking, dogs barking, the crackle of a blacksmith's forge. It's no paradise, but it's alive, and somehow, that feels sacred. In the doorway of Tomas's hut, Marion leans against the frame, smiling softly. You didn't die, she says. Not bad for a first day. You chuckle. Barely. She nods approvingly. Then you're one of us now. Inside, the fire burns low. The warmth feels different tonight, not a desperate shield against cold, but a quiet companion. The flickering light dances on the walls, the air filled with the faint scent of herbs and smoke. Tomas hums a slow tune under his breath, something old and wordless. Marion joins in, her voice soft and lilting. It's not a song of joy or sorrow, it's a song of persistence, of lives lived in rhythm with the land. You close your eyes, letting the melody fade into the sound of crackling wood and distant crickets. You think of everything you've seen, the filth, the laughter, the hunger, the faith. Somehow, all of it fits together, the hardship and the beauty, inseparable like night and day. And as you sit there, warm, full, and utterly exhausted, you understand at last that survival here isn't just about enduring pain, it's about finding meaning in small comforts, about working and resting and hoping again tomorrow. Because in this place, in this time, that's all anyone ever really had. The fire's glow softens now, its edges blurring as the last of the day exhales into quiet. You can almost hear the heartbeat of the village slowing with yours, the crackle of embers, the sigh of wind through the thatch, the faint rustle of sleeping animals. Outside, the moon rises pale and low, spilling silver light over the fields you helped plant. The world feels smaller, safer somehow, wrapped in a hush that only comes after hard work and shared warmth. You stretch beneath the rough wool blanket, the smell of smoke and earth clinging gently to you. The fatigue is heavy, but comforting. It settles deep into your bones like a reminder that you've earned this rest. Somewhere, an owl calls, low and distant. You imagine the people in nearby huts doing the same as you, settling in, drifting off, trusting the fire to last till morning. You think back on your journey, through hunger and frost, laughter and fear, and realize that, in some quiet way, you did survive a day in a medieval village. You adapted, endured, learned to find peace in the rhythm of a simpler, harsher world. The last thing you feel is warmth, the fires, the villages, maybe even the pasts, and as your mind drifts, you let it carry you into sleep. Rest now. The world will still be here when you wake.